Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening for those participating from across the Atlantic. I'm Jeff Corbin. I'm one of the founders of theIRapp, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, particularly since we had to postpone the event due to Hurricane Sandy. Today we have a great group of experts who are here to discuss for the first time in a public forum the new paradigm in investor relations communications. I've been in the IR industry for more than 15 years, and it hasn't been since the dot-com bubble burst that I can remember a time as interesting and exciting as today, particularly with regard to technology and how it has the ability to really help us not only as communications professionals, but also with respect to the relationship between public companies and the investment community. Today we're going to look at the way investor relations is becoming impacted by the incredibly fast proliferation of mobile devices throughout the world. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. You'll see on your computer screen a question and answer box. If you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them in the box and we'll try to get to all of them by the end of the event. I also wanted to point out on the bottom of your screen there are icons and widgets where you can get more information about our presenters, where you can connect with us on social media, and much more. You will also see an icon with a check in it for a survey. We hope that during the event you'll take the time to click through and answer the questions. It's pretty simple, pretty short. And given the audience today, the results we believe will be very informative on what the IR industry should expect in the coming years with regard to mobile. With us today are Rich Karpinski, the senior analyst at Yankee Group who specializes in mobile, Neil Russell, vice president of investor relations for Sysco Corporation, and Rich Repetto, a sell-side analyst at Sandler O'Neill & Partners who covers financial services companies including E-Trade, Ameritrade, and other online brokerage firms. Before I turn the call over to our speakers, I wanted to spend a few minutes putting today's discussion into context. And then I'll turn the event over to our panel who will each share with you some thoughts on today's topic of mobile IR communications today and tomorrow. In my recently published book on investor relations, I talk about 4 basic steps for a public company to be successful in its IR efforts. First, the company needs to know what its investment proposition is and what the company stands for in the eyes of potential investors. And with this in mind, the company then needs to identify what types of investors are appropriate to introduce the company's story to. As we know, not every story is appropriate for every investor that's out there. Next, the company needs to put together the communications materials that tell the company's story to justify the valuation that the company believes it's entitled to. And last, the company needs to build relationships with current and prospective investors who, if the story is properly communicated to them, will attribute a fair and accurate value to the company's stock. Today's conversation is really about step 4, building relationships with investors and the use of mobile technology in doing so. I thought it would be interesting and kind of fun to take a step back and think about how communications has evolved over the centuries, decades, and years. If you think back to the turn of the century, and I'm referring to the 20th century, life was so different. Communications were slow, and it could take weeks for a piece of information to reach its intended audience. As the years went on, things got quicker and quicker, and maybe even a little quicker and quicker. And then around the early 1980s, things started to get really interesting. Before I became involved in IR, I was a practicing attorney, and the story I tell to younger executives who work for me is that I remember standing over a fax machine, reading a document I was about to send to my adversary 10 times over, knowing that if there was a typo or mistake in the document, as soon as I pressed the send and dial button, the letter was gone for good and my job could be on the line. I remember the paranoia of that moment. Well, today, fax machines have become almost obsolete, but the paranoia still exists. But now it's with the push of the send or of an email or the return key on a computer keyboard to file an SEC filing with Edgar. And need I remind you of the R.R. Donnelley Google debacle just a few weeks ago. If we look back to the late 1990s, this was when the internet really was starting to become mainstream with respect to everyday communications. When I left the practice of law in 1997, my law firm didn't have email, and everyone relied on AOL's dial-up email service. It's hard to believe that it was only 15 years ago that this was the world we lived in, considering where we are today. And so this takes us to today. If you attend investor conferences or analyst days, what do you notice first? Well, the first thing I notice is that almost everyone in the room has an iPhone, an iPad, a tablet, or some sort of mobile device. And this phenomenon didn't occur over a span of a decade, as did the requirement that a public company consolidate all of its investor relations content under one tab on its corporate website. Rather, it's only been a matter of a few years since essentially everyone in our industry, both public company and investors, now depend on their mobile device for so many aspects of their lives. So here you have it. Mobile technology is here to stay. What will be the next? I don't know. But the question we have to all ask ourselves is, how do we as investor relations professionals work mobile into our IR strategy and our communications platform? And it's with this question in mind that I am now pleased to turn the event over to Rich Karpinski of Yankee Group. Rich?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. Great job in going through 200 years of history of communications in about 5 minutes. What I hope to do is take a look at the here and now, or maybe 6 months to a year previous and 6 months to a year look ahead, and give our audience a feel for why mobile matters, what's important about it, and how it will affect the topic at hand today, which is the distribution of investor relations information. To get us started, just a quick look at Yankee Group and how we're organized. So Yankee Group is a research and advisory firm. We're 100% focused on looking at what we're calling the new mobile economy, and just to get a feel for what that means, right? It gives you a sense of the overarching ecosystem here, right? So we're talking about mobile broadband. We're talking about the AT&T and Verizons and such of the world. We're talking about mobile and connected devices that we all have in our pockets, mobile apps and cloud. So spending a lot of time today talking about mobile applications, most of which are delivered from somewhere out in the world and delivered to your mobile device over a network, and then this whole area of mobile money and e-commerce, and in which the investor relations world is obviously very closely tied to as well. So we're 100% focused on it. We think you can't understate the importance of this, and the idea of connecting the dots between these themes and these areas is crucially important to us, and I think for any company needs to have a feel for just how big of an impact this is having today. So what is the impact? I mean, we are forecasting the new mobile economy by the year 2016 to basically triple in size, to be almost a $3 trillion opportunity. So this is no small opportunity. And really the question for anyone here in the audience is, is your company equipped to succeed today? And what is the risk if you fall behind in taking advantage of this mobile opportunity? It's interesting to look at the dynamics of how mobility works, the give and play, right? So I broke down what we see as the 4 sectors, and the interesting thing is they all sort of build on one another, right? And so as we've seen advances over time, and as we will see them moving into the future, there's a cumulative impact where better networks. So we're in a mode this year where we're moving from 3G to 4G networks, and you'll see terms like LTE and such bandied about, and great growth in bandwidth. And then what that does is drive further adoption of mobile data services, which we're seeing last year and this year, seeing the operators doing very, very well in moving their subscribers to mobile data services, and then the corresponding growth and boom in content that are optimized and made specifically for these mobile devices, initially smartphones, and then we're in a mode now, I think, in 2012 where we're seeing larger screen smartphones, which is making it even easier to consume mobile content, and obviously we're seeing tablets that are moving from sort of in-home and in-office devices to being more mobile devices, and then that correspondingly improving the entire mobile experience and upping the expectations of users who are then driving back in and looking for more bandwidth, better devices, and better content. So we're very much in the middle of this cycle, but there is room for growth, and it's something that I think any company should be tracking and trying to keep up with an area that's moving at a pace of great change, great pace of change. If there's any doubt that this revolution is already underway, I think with mobility, it's really hard to miss. I'm sure everybody on the phone is square in the middle of this. Anybody who's a professional is square in the middle of owning a smartphone, owning tablets, probably multiple devices, becoming very, very dependent on those devices for personal communications and business communications. And it's only going to proliferate, where we're going to see more and more connected devices, where we're going to see the ecosystem opportunities continue to grow and expand, new kinds of devices and new kinds of consumers. And this entire mobile revolution is well underway, as you can see some of the numbers here on this chart. So what we're here to talk today a bit about is apps, right? So the idea of apps being at the center of the mobile economy. And you'll hear the phrase a native application thrown about a bit. And so a native application is an application, as many of us know, that's purpose-built for a particular device. So apps grew strongly out of the iPhone and the iOS experience. The iTunes App Store drove a lot of the initial growth and a lot of the interest and excitement around apps. You have similar App Store environments on the Android ecosystem, which is now the largest, just in terms of square and pure numbers, right, the largest ecosystem. And then you see other players working very hard, Microsoft with Windows and now Windows 8, which ties together the desktop and the mobile device in an application ecosystem. And you have BlackBerry, which probably many of us were using a couple of years ago. While that's fallen down, we're seeing them trying to make a wave back to some new platforms with BlackBerry 10. And so you've got these very strong ecosystems that are built around not only devices but built around their application story. And so apps are very much at the center of what's happening across this mobile economy. It's important to note that as the apps drive this, we're also seeing, that device penetration continue to rise. And if you look at the orange line there, that's the smartphone penetration through mid-year this year, and we see we're still continuing to rise. We're reaching a bit of a saturation point, but if the saturation point's around 60% and up, I mean it's a pretty large market of millions and billions of users around the globe. And if you look at the lower lines there, you're seeing that that tablets are starting to make their mark, and this year is really a year of not only tablet growth but also connected tablet growth, where you've got modems that will let you access LTE and other networks on the fly. So you've got these really excellent devices for consuming content that are becoming more and more widely used and are becoming more and more mobile enabled. We all deal with apps every day. Again, this is an audience, a very sophisticated audience, and there is a great variety of applications that we use on both every day in both smartphones and tablets. What's of interest here is that again, outside of games, probably beyond that, news and information consumption remains a very primary use of both smartphones and mobile devices. I think if you looked at this from a business-only perspective, that would obviously be even higher. So the need to have access to information on the fly and where you need it is really one of the primary uses of mobile apps, and we only see that continuing to grow in importance. Again, and we'll talk a bit about this more later, but one of the great things about a mobile app is the ability of it to really capture a user's attention. And this is something that we've seen move from the web world to the mobile world, where it's not just about hits and impressions and things like that. You really want to have a very strong relation with your customer via a mobile app, or your user via a mobile app, and or any sort of application, right? And so what we're seeing with mobile apps is a crossover point in the past year or so, where the minutes of day per use on an app versus web browsing apps are becoming more and more used, and they are becoming go-to applications for key uses for almost all sorts of mobile users. So how do we sort of boil this down? What's the story and the takeaway if you're a brand or a company or an information distributor, right? So I want to leave you with a few takeaway points. The opportunity in mobile apps is to provide a bounded and branded experience. That's extremely important. You get to control that experience much more than you do on the mobile web, and also that experience is optimized for the device. So you can be sure that the user is not on a screen size where they can't see a mobile browser, or are digging out information, say from an email client or something where you're competing with a bunch of other messages. This allows you to have an experience that you control and that you deliver in the way that's best fit for your audience. It also gives you an opportunity to have a very personal relationship with your customers who now become your subscribers in a way not dissimilar to email marketing. You sort of own that relationship. You can build upon that relationship, and you have a very trusted relationship with that customer. Also, as we talked about, the way that apps are built, not only on smartphones but on tablets, you have a very lean-into experience. You're very engaged in the content, and this kind of content becomes, because it's so well presented and delivered, it becomes a habitual experience for customers who are very, very engaged with your information and with your brand, right? So what are the challenges? There's always challenges with new technology platforms and new technology capabilities. So in the mobile world, there's some things that you definitely need to look out for, right? So it's a definite challenge to build for and distribute to multiple platforms, right? And that's probably the number one challenge that is facing mobile content providers today. They need to find the best app building tools and partners. You need to get noticed within an app store and be able to stand out within an app store. You need tools for understanding and analyzing performance. And you absolutely want to be optimizing your bets and your investments in these areas. And you also want a partner who will help you figure out what comes next. So as we talk about how to invest in mobile applications and work with mobile service providers, these are the kind of things that we recommend that companies look for in terms of their partners and their platforms and the tools to really maximize their mobile app investments. So I hope that was helpful. Very quickly wanted to drive you through some of the trends that are driving the mobile economy. We certainly welcome you to look for more information at the Yankee Group. In particular, we put out a daily newsletter that across those sectors that we talked about analyzes what's happening on a daily basis. We'd love to see you there. That's a free newsletter. And there's various ways to interact with us. So thank you very much, Jeff, and I'll leave it for the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. That was great. Just a reminder for all of our participants, if you have any questions for Rich or for any of the other panelists, you can ask them in the box at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you haven't done so already, we encourage you to take the survey. I'd now like to introduce Neil Russell, the Vice President of Investor Relations of Sysco Corporation.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and hello, everyone. Glad to be here, and glad we could spend some time together going over this topic. In the interest of a true investor relations professional, I'm going to be relatively brief in my prepared comments and leave most of it for Q&A, as Jeff was just suggesting. But just real quick, I've led the investor relations team here at Sysco for 5 years now. Prior to that, I led the investor relations efforts at Delta Airlines before coming to Houston. The main topics I'm going to cover with you today are the importance of developing a mobile IR strategy here at Sysco and some of the things that we've done, and subsequently why we chose to participate in mobile, why we think it's important. I'll talk about some of the content we have on our app today and how we're marketing that to engage our investor audience. I'll just give you a few stats on utilization and the feedback that we've gotten from our audience thus far. I think the reality is, and what Jeff framed up in his opening quite well, is that the world is going mobile, and that includes the investor audience. And more, the investor audience is using mobile devices in the meetings in which we engage with them or in their research on our company. I think the adoption of iPads and tablet mobile devices, as well as smartphones, that Jeff said earlier, are the key to why an app seemed to make sense for us. The aha moment I had was an investor day that we held last December, which is the typical investor event up in New York City in a hotel ballroom. About 125 people in attendance, and we had the typical IR presentation that I think numbered 110 pages. And we thought it may be useful to the audience members, obviously, to have the materials in front of them as our various speakers were engaging them throughout the day. So we thought to go ahead and load the massive PowerPoint file onto a thumb drive for them to use, and I get up on stage and welcome everyone to begin to read the safe harbor and look out in the audience, and more than half the audience is using tablets or iPads or mobile devices, and the thumb drive was not very helpful to them. So the reality is that you have IR content that's not the easiest thing to package for mobile devices, whether it be our long investor presentations and the multiple slides with the graphics we have included with them, or the long SEC filing documents. None of that is particularly in a friendly format unless you have an app structure around it. And that was something that was important to us because we really felt the need to make our investor information available to the investor on the go. I think the reality is they're not particularly sitting in their offices nearly as much as we think they are. They're on the road. They're engaging clients. They're in and out of the car or the train, and they're doing their research on our company mostly probably from their mobile device, and that formatting was really a key for us. The app itself provides a platform really for a complete investor toolkit is the way I like to think about it. So in our app, we've got our annual reports, and that includes things like our sustainability report that we publish, of course our SEC filings. It's got some of our presentations. We even have videos, which is important to us. We anticipate doing more of that type of work in the future. And so as we've enhanced our website and put more video content out there, the fact that we can fold it into the app is something that's impactful for us. We also use the push notification. That's helpful to a big part of our audience so that when a new posted document pops up, we can ensure that they've got that and they have access to the most timely and accurate information that we're trying to expose them to. And I think another important point is really looking out beyond the investor audience. So we consider our employees and our customers and our suppliers as part of the community that uses the app, and we know that there are many different constituencies that are looking to stay up to date with the company, and this tool really gives those folks an opportunity to stay in touch with us. The marketing was pretty straightforward from our perspective. We have an exhaustive database and contact list of investors that we notified when the app was up and running to get them engaged with it. And we also make note of it in our boilerplate language within our press release so that they have the link and the opportunity to go download it either from the Apple Store, the iTunes Store, or from Google Play for the Android devices. And we talk about it in some of the disclaimer and upfront language that I would typically review, say on earnings calls or as part of investor presentations. I remind the audience that the tool is there for them to use. We've only been live I think about 3 months now, and we're approaching 1,000 downloads. So we're pretty pleased with that. It's pretty robust response. I think there's a lot of folks who have been exposed to it and have appreciated the fact that they can access our materials more easily than in the past. We've gotten some pretty good feedback on it, most of it very positive in terms of just the usability and the fact that they can tune in to our materials. The communication with investors, I think, is much easier now that we have this tool available to us. We complement it with the Twitter account that we have, and I think between the two of them, they seem to talk to each other quite well and play off each other. And the app really just makes it easier, I think, for investors to do their research on us, and it makes their life easier. In closing, I think it's really all about providing a seamless investor experience, if you just really want to boil it down. And everything is in one central mobile location now for us. And our investors' time is valuable, and we know that. And we want to make it easy for them and efficient for them to access the information they need. That's really what we're here to do. We're in the business of getting information to our investors so that they can make a qualified decision about the company. And so the more that we can centralize and make things mobile and easier for them to access is something that's very attractive to us. And so I'm going to leave it there in terms of my prepared comments. I'm happy to take questions as we go through it, but Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Neil. So having just heard the company perspective on how mobile technology is affecting the IR function and the opportunities it presents, we wanted for you to have the investment community's perspective on how they are using mobile in their work and the extent to which they depend on mobile devices to help in their work. So it's my privilege to introduce to you Rich Repetto from Sandler O'Neill & Partners.
Thank you, Jeff. I am Rich Repetto. I'm a sell-side analyst. I am also a partner at Sandler O'Neill. Sandler O'Neill is focused on financial services. My particular coverage is of the exchanges, the trading companies, and the e-brokers. So I've been covering the sector for over 12 years, have seen a lot of things change in how we distribute research, on how we receive financial information. And it's funny because it's not only in my job on how I do it, but it's also the companies that I follow have been part of this evolutionary process as well. As I said, I've been doing this since the late 1990s, and as I humbly say, I'm the longest-standing analyst in my sector, and that's because my peers have moved on to do bigger and better things. But if we could turn to the next slide, I did watch a phenomena, a distribution platform impact the companies that I covered, namely the e-brokers, and that was the Internet in the 1990s. And as that slide says, the speed, the convenience, and the price, as well as the price of stock trading, really forced a big adoption of trading online. But they all came together to do so. So similarly, now I'm watching a new phenomena, and that's with mobile applications. More stock trades are being done every day by retail traders online, and that's again it's a combination of what's the information that's available, the speed, the convenience, and prices are actually the same whether it's web or mobile trading. But I did want to give you some stats on what the companies are reporting to me as far as activity. TD Ameritrade, an online broker based in Omaha, they report that 200,000 users log in every month via mobile applications, and about 8% of their trading is now done via mobile apps. They have a number of different trading platforms they offer for each different trading platform, whether it be equities, whether it be their options trading platform, Thinkorswim. They offer mobile applications for each of the trading platforms. Similarly, E-Trade reports about 7% of their traders or trades come from mobile, and that's increasing over from a year ago. They operate 6 different mobile applications as well as video streaming, charts. E-Trade, if you don't know, also owns a bank, and they also offer check deposit functionality. So just as the web was very, well made for stock trading, financial services, and stock trading in particular, mobile applications are similarly very well made and very help the on-the-go retail investor to invest in companies today. I did want to mention the applications of some of the uses that the exchanges are using, and I think this will hit home to at least some of the IR people on the call. Each of the exchanges have now, when I say each, I'm namely talking about the NYSE and NASDAQ, they've worked to build out services to the IR departments, and as some of you all know, more and more they're using functionality and mobile applications to provide these services. For example, Director's Desk is an application of NASDAQ where they allow the companies that list on NASDAQ, they offer it to their directors, to the boards, that there's an application where they can share documents, real-time meetings, draft press releases with edit functioning. All this is done in a mobile application to make it easier and more convenient for the directors to use it. So, we see more of that come, and the exchanges see more of that as well. I did want to go to the next slide and just talk about, that's what my companies are doing, but I am also a practitioner of both receiving information from companies, because I am a research analyst, but also distributing information, because I think someday there'll be more research that we provide to institutions being done via mobile apps as well. But this goes into, at least from my standpoint as a practitioner, the whole evolution of just trying to be more efficient and more effective in the different means of getting my product out to the institutional investor. So first on how I receive information, as been mentioned earlier, more and more being on the go. I'm using an iPad, and I want to get information readable in the cleanest format. Nothing can be more frustrating for an analyst is to get information and not be able to read it easily or not be formatted well, and that's exactly where mobile applications can help. And also with functionality. For example, if it's an SEC filing, I want to be able to search on keywords and get to the 150-page, get through the 150-page documents and find the things I'm looking for. So more and more, mobile applications help with that. We expect, IR departments to disseminate information, through all these channels, whether it be smart websites or mobile applications. But, we expect to be able, no matter what device, as Neil said, if you're going to an analyst day, we expect now to be able to see that information, again, easily readable and easily able to get through and find the things that we want. Now, where this, I think, will come in even more so, we are adapting as a research provider myself, we're adapting more applications to the web, our publications, our notes, not to the web, to mobile applications as well, so that they can be seen and viewed easily via a smartphone or a tablet as well. To the extent where we're working on things like video streaming, to tablets, to get a brief synopsis of a report that I may put out. So I think I echo what the previous speakers have said, in that the greater penetration and the greater adoption of mobile apps is only going to increase more people looking to get their research and to get their financial information via these mobile applications. So that's all I have, and I will turn it back to Jeff.
Thanks, Rich. As I mentioned earlier, if there are any questions, just type them into the Q&A box on your screen. We already have several questions that have come in, which we'll get to in a moment. To the extent that we don't have time, we're going to conclude. We're scheduled to conclude at 1:30 Eastern, so if we don't have time to get to all the questions, then we'll make sure to get answers following the event. Just going to hold the questions right now. We have a question for Neil, which is, what has been the response from institutional investors to the Sysco IRapp?
Well, it's a good question. The response has been positive and favorable in the sense that, we are making their life easier, and in my informal conversations as well as our more formal outreach, we've asked investors what's important to them and how we can deliver information to them in a more user-friendly format, and they very much appreciate the fact that this material is now more formatted and more easily accessible on a mobile device, whereas in the past if you were using your mobile device to access our corporate website, you were having to pinch and zoom and twist and turn and try and find different ways to look at the content, and then sometimes the content may not load appropriately. So we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the institutional investors. We know that this is material that they need to access on a regular basis, and it's much easier for them to access now.
That's great. There's another question that came in on whether, and it wasn't specified at any of the speakers, but can you comment on the hesitation that users have to fill their iPhones with apps that they would only use a few times a quarter? So, I wasn't sure if that question was asked myself with regards to the theIRapp. The one thing I would comment is that based on usage, and what we're seeing is that the actual average daily open rate of IR apps is approximately 10%. So to the extent a company has 1,000 downloads, to have 100 of the individuals who have downloaded open it on a daily basis, that kind of says or suggests that the app is being used more than just on a quarterly basis. But also just hearing what Neil said with regards to the types of content that they are using, that Sysco is using, and what other companies are using. It's not just about the quarterly earnings. It's not just about the SEC filings that maybe come out once a quarter, but it's also the adding of a broader picture and adding more color to the overall IR story. So enhancing with video and the ability to showcase commercials, if you have commercials that are airing on television, or corporate videos and presentations where a company is presenting throughout the year at different conferences, and being able to push that information to investors so that it's not just those that are in attendance have the opportunity to see what a company is talking about. Neil, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I had mentioned videos is one of the items that we have contained within our materials here, and the reality is it's not just that quarterly webcast or that financial press release. We have interim events, and/or we have these materials like videos out there where if someone is trying to research us for the first time, and we tend to have that type of investor contact us a lot, where they do a fair amount of work up front before we have our typical 1-hour conference call to learn about the company, and they're very thorough in their analysis before they get to that call, and so they're reaching out and using these type of materials to learn about the company, understand the industry in which we're in, how we perform, what our strategy is, those types of things, which go well beyond just a quarterly update, and having those things available for them is obviously key for us.
Right. And I guess one thing where we're seeing a lot of interest is the ability of companies to upload the archive of their conference calls. Now, yes, that goes to the question on it's a once a quarter event, but the fact of the matter is that now there's a way to push the archive of the call to investors, so they're not relegated necessarily to their desktop. Rich Repetto, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I would imagine that during the course of every quarter, you have to listen to maybe several dozen conference calls, and how might this help you in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I want to do my job I don't get to see all the conference calls all the time, so I need to view them at night or over the weekends, unfortunately. And if I can do that on an iPad and not have to be at a home office or do it in a more relaxed atmosphere, it's certainly helpful. And then, and this may be unique to my sector, but also, if there is certain companies do provide daily information, and in my case, exchanges provide daily information about their trading volumes. So now that may not be the case in in fact, it isn't the case in every sector, but we're going to the websites every day, and the more I see, not just IR, but people are, just the corporate information in general, the websites of the companies are beefed up, and so people are going to the websites, more often, and again, If they're doing it in their leisure time, they're doing it through some mobile device.
Great, thanks. There was a question that came in for Rich Karpinski from Yankee Group. Rich, you touched briefly on the subject of HTML5 apps versus native apps, and the question is, can you be a little bit more specific about the difference between the two and the advantages or disadvantages of one over the other?
Yeah, certainly. So you need to think about it in two different ways. One, your developer or your marketing department is going to need a way to put together an app, right, or a website. And so HTML5 is just the next generation of markup language. And HTML is the language of the web, so it's the next generation, and it has some built-in capabilities to span mobile and different size devices in ways that have been better than in the past. And so it's certainly a nice tool to have in the toolbox. What you get with a native app, and especially as we see some of the native platforms lock themselves in, so it's very much now an iPhone and Android world. So you're not dealing with sort of 10 different types of devices. You're dealing with 2, and maybe at some point in the future 3. You're getting that optimized experience for displaying information. And so as our speakers have been saying, they want to be able to see certain types of documents or video content in ways that are truly optimized for their device and the experience they're looking to have. And the problem with HTML5 on any sort of device, and particularly a smaller smartphone or even a tablet, is it's built to be it's built to a lowest common denominator. So while you're getting some improvement there, you're never going to have the optimized experience you'd have with a native app. The other thing is, again, is it just the idea of owning that native app space and being able to very much customize it. And so the question about whether you would be using an app on an occasional basis, right? If the information is valuable enough and the presentation is suitable and unique enough, I think the case is that you would. If you're making your mobile app be just maybe a light version of your website, then you're probably missing the boat, and then that user is going to question whether there's some value there. So what we would recommend is to optimize that mobile app, make the best use of it you can, really think about how to make it a unique experience and a personal experience, and that's going to encourage the type of relationship that you're going to want to have with that person on the other side consuming that information.
Thanks. There's kind of a follow-on question from a different participant today, and it's directed to Neil at Sysco. What is the benefit of a native app versus creating your IR website, which houses much of the same content, in a responsive design that can be accessed across multiple devices? Because you have a native app, right, Neil?
We do.
So how did you decide to go native versus just more of a responsive kind of optimizing your website for the mobile device?
Well, we've got a pretty expansive website, and it includes a lot of things, obviously for investors, but also for customers and suppliers, employees, potential employees, et cetera, probably like a lot of companies. And the reality is that's one tool, and that makes some information available. You have to click through a few different times, and you can get to where you're going. And I would say, most institutional investors and sell-side folks are probably pretty accustomed to that. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about an app, it really comes back to the formatting issue for me. And I think this is maybe where the question is going, but if not, the folks can correct me. But so the website's one thing, but if you're mobile and you're not sitting at your desk, then the app allows you the opportunity to have formatted content. And that is a big, big deal for me and for us here at Sysco. And that's really what the difference was. And the reality is, I'm not in the business of designing apps. I'm in the business of getting investor content to current and potential investors. And so by having an app available to us and by leveraging those opportunities, I think we're accomplishing our goals, which is above and beyond what the website can do in and of itself. So the website serves a purpose, and it's very helpful, but these things take it to the next level.
Great. We have a question that I think can be posed to all three of you. It's to what extent can a mobile app be said to be replacing a corporate website, or is it complementary? Someone want to take a first shot at that one?
Yeah, this is Rich Karpinski. I can jump in. I mean, I think it's in almost every way you look at it, it's complementary. I mean, you wouldn't want to staff it or create information or manage it outside of existing processes. What it is it's a way to take what an existing business process, which is talking to that community, and just create an optimized experience as Neil just discussed, right? And so what you're doing is just optimizing for a particular audience or use case. And as I said, if you can do it in a way that's very, very compelling, it's absolutely going to get used and be appreciated. And so in those ways, it's just part of the continuum of how you need to deal with customers these days, I think.
Great. We have a question for Neil. In terms of the process that Sysco went through to get your IR up and running, was there involvement, or did you need to have involvement with your IT or web development? How did the process work?
Sure. No, it's a good question. We did, is the short answer to it. We had a cross-functional decision process here, where on the one hand you've got a financial decision to make. So of course your finance team and in measuring the impact of your investment is one part of it, but then also ensuring that both the web development as well as just the broader IT organization are involved, because I think it gets back to one of the earlier questions in that the reality is, as a big company, you're probably trying to avoid app creep, and so you want to be sure that the decisions you make and that the apps you do introduce into the organization are beneficial and appropriate and branded accordingly. So it gets beyond the IT organization, it gets into corporate communications, it gets into marketing. And so, quite frankly, we worked throughout the organization to socialize the process, the benefits, the cost, the timing, and be sure that everybody across all those different departments I just named was aligned and agreed with the need and the timing for it. And in this case, it was a pretty simple sell because of the type of materials we have. But I'm certain there probably are other instances where a given department may have an idea for an app or something, and the reality is a company has to be sure that it all fits within a certain umbrella, and so there's likely times where an opportunity is declined. In this case, obviously it wasn't, because it was a pretty straightforward process and a pretty simple solution for us. So long answer, I apologize, but IT absolutely, web development, which is part of that, but that also reaches into our marketing organization here at Sysco, as well as marketing in general, so that we represent ourselves appropriately, and of course the finance organization.
Great, thanks. There's a question that just came in for Rich Repetto. In terms of the types of content that you think would be most helpful and ideal to come to you through your mobile device in your work as a sell-side analyst, if you could have three things pushed to you, what would they be?
Well, I guess the first would got to be some type of an alert. If any of the companies that I cover, if there's a news release or a new SEC document file, I know it can be done via the web as well, but if you're traveling, you want to know as soon as possible that something is out there, and then the sort of the linkage to it. So certainly some alert service. What are particularly helpful when it comes to the tablets and the iPads, graphics, stock price information or historical information. The more of that's available, because it is easy to handle on some of the devices, that'd be helpful. And then I think this has been talked about, but the links to the events and the video streaming of a conference call, if you can do that, if I can do that in my own time, that's helpful, and not having to be locked to a computer to see it. So if I can view and make up some of this overtime work by using a mobile device to conference calls, et cetera, and earnings, that's helpful.
Great. At this point, it doesn't seem that there are any more questions. Just to let you know, on your screen in the bottom right-hand icon, you can download the presentations from today. In addition, there's going to be an archive of today's events that will be available at our website, which is www.theIRapp.com. It'll hopefully be available in the next several hours or shortly after that. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email them to us through the contact form on the IRAP's website or through our social channels. There were some questions that came in regarding pricing, and we're happy to answer those offline. I want to thank our three presenters for participating in today's webinar. If you have any questions for them specifically, feel free to email them to us, and we'll make sure that they get to them. I also want to extend our thanks to PR Newswire and to Message Bank for their sponsorship of today's events. If you're interested in a demo of the IRApp, feel free to contact me or our customer care department. And that concludes our event, and everyone should have a great day. Thanks very much.